Through the speakers?
Just a little closer to your mouth.
Is it better now? That's better. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started, so if everyone would take their seats, please. So my name is Garrett Sheeky, and I'm the Director of Program Quality at Lutheran World Relief. And so program quality, underneath that, becomes our Resilience program. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. I'm based in Baltimore, but I'm here supporting my colleagues in our country office here in Kenya. So I wanted to start off by thanking all of you for being here today. I know that it's not easy to find time in your busy schedules to spend the entire day thinking on a particular topic, and I know that there's very pressing issues in Kenya at this point in time. I guess there's a presentation that's going to happen at 10 o'clock, is that right, about kind of the election and things like that. So hopefully we can have some of that information that's coming through during our break that we have at 10:15. I think what really impresses me is that we have a large number of people here today. And I think that lends credence to the fact that resilience is a really, really important topic, particularly here in Kenya. We know that all communities face shocks and stressors. And if we're blind to the impact that has on our programming and the impact that has on the communities, I think we all know that we're not going to be able to achieve the results that we seek to achieve as organizations working in the development sector. LWR and CRS see this as really an exciting first step to more intentionally engage the community here in Kenya around these resilience topics. I think that we've had some learnings from some of the projects that we'll be doing presentations on later, but I know that everyone in the room is also working on resilience and has lessons to share. So I wanted to also just thank CRS and LWR, in particular our country directors here in Kenya. So first of all, Lane Bunkers, thank you for supporting this. And Jacob Mutemi, also thank you for supporting this event. I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of this event. Resilience is complex, especially here in Kenya. I think in Kenya there's a highly diverse population, and many of which have livelihoods that are very vulnerable to shocks and stressors, in particular drought, which I think you've experienced quite often here in Kenya as of late. In these populations you have, when you think about resilience, it's not just one population that needs to be resilient, it's the whole population. But how do you address resilience when you have populations that are as diverse as coffee farmers on Mount Elgon versus pastoralists in Marsabit? Very different contexts, and probably very different actions that you would need to take to create the resilience of these communities. And so, in that sense, I think everyone in the room probably has a different understanding of an experience implementing and evaluating resilience. And with that complexity of resilience comes challenges. And I think that no one in this room, not the presenters, nor anyone probably sitting at these tables has all of the answers. And so I think in that sense, we have the humility to know what we don't know about resilience. But that also necessitates that we collaborate to try to make sense of resilience and to learn from each other and to share these experiences. Otherwise, we're out there reinventing the wheel, whereas we could probably capitalize on some of our knowledge of our peers that are sitting in this room to really catalyze the programming around resilience. So I just wanted to go over quickly the agenda that we have today, which I think is really exciting. We've tried to make the agenda as participatory as possible, and you'll see that the entire afternoon is dedicated to participatory work. And I think that that's the most exciting part of the day. And so what we're going to really want is for everyone in the room to be thinking about how they're engaging resilience. What are their questions? What are the questions that you have? Where are the gaps in your knowledge or understanding? And trying to find colleagues that can help fill some of those gaps or give you some insight into the work that you're doing. We're going to start the morning off with a panel discussion, and we have panelists that are engaging in resilience from the perspective of the private sector, of the government, of the Kenyan government, of donor organizations, and also from academia. And after the panel discussion, Tango International is going to do a short presentation on right-sizing resilience monitoring and evaluation. Their famous kind of model working from a Ferrari to a Fiat. Not all of us can implement Ferrari models of monitoring and evaluation, so how can we implement a Fiat model that can actually serve our purposes if we're a smaller organization? And then we're going to go on to real-life examples of some of the resilience work that's been done here in Kenya, examples from CRS and from LWR. And then finally, as I said, we're going to have group work in the afternoon. And that group work will first start off with general questions around resilience frameworks, around resilience concepts. How do we apply them? What resilience frameworks are we using as an organization? What are other organizations using in terms of resilience frameworks? And then we're going to dig into 8 key questions that were identified by the Resilience Monitoring Evidence and Learning Community of Practice that was established and supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. So you'll see on your agenda those 8 questions that are there, which I think should be quite interesting topics at each one of the tables. And then we also, at the end of the day, what we would like to see from LWR is additional opportunities for collaboration. So if there's particular interest about one of these topics or exploring resilience more generally, we would like to try to continue these conversations in the future. So if there's events that we can host, that we can act as a convener, we're open to that as well. Just as a reminder to everyone, in order to engage a wider audience, we're actually live streaming the sessions in the morning outside of the panel. So each one of those will be live streamed. If your colleagues are in the office and they don't know about that, you might want to send them a quick email. You can go to the link, I believe it's on the website, is that right? Yeah, it's on the website. And so they can see a live feed of the presentations that we're gonna have this morning. All right, from there, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker, Jesper Hornberg. Jesper is the lead of infrastructure and technology at the Global Resilience Partnership. And as part of this, he is heading up the Resilience Incubator and sits on the management team of the partnership. Jesper has a varied background as a successful entrepreneur who went to the development sector to look for new and creative ways to create real and sustainable development. He is still looking for ways to do that. Doesn't solve that issue. He has spent 7 years with the Swedish International Development and Cooperation Agency, SIDA, where he focused on private sector development. And since he moved to Kenya in 2010, he has co-founded several businesses and social enterprises in renewable energy and sanitary products. Since 2010, Jesper has also been Associate Director at KPMG IDAS, where he has spent most of his time supporting challenge funds such as the Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund, which focuses mostly on evaluating business models in renewable energy and agribusiness. So I would like everyone to welcome Jesper and his presentation that he'll give to us. Jesper, welcome.
Great, it's a great pleasure to be here today. I'm gonna mix between reading and just speaking spontaneously to you guys so that I make sure I cover everything I want to. All protocols adhered to, so ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, fellow humans, it's a pleasure to be here. Can you all hear me well? Good. There is a free table here. If someone is not hearing so well, you can just move up. It's totally fine to do that during my speech. Well, first of all, thanks to Lutheran World Relief and Catholic Relief Services for this opportunity to speak, and for also organizing this so we can discuss this very complex and pressing issue. It's something we work with every day. I went through the list of participants, and it's an impressive group of people. I'd like to ask a question though. How many here are from NGOs? How many from government? So there's not one person I can single out and ask questions. Okay. How many private sector? Okay, good. So you two are, you're on the panel, so you know. Sorry. Yeah, as Garrett said, I'm the lead for technology and infrastructure at the GRP, the Global Resilience Partnership. It was founded from a marriage or partnership. Rockefeller Foundation took the initiative. USAID came on board, and then SIDA about 2.5 years ago. Up until about 2 weeks ago, we were hosted by KPMG IDAS, which is sort of the development arm of KPMG. So we don't do any audits as such, but we try to learn business models and so on. And about 2 weeks ago, the Stockholm Resilience Center took over and is now our host. Now, the Stockholm Resilience Center, for those of you not aware of what they do, they're more of a research institution. So they do lots of research into what resilience is. They're the guys, or they're one of the guys that really trailblazed the term the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene meaning human root. It's the era that they claim, and I would claim so as well, but there's no consensus on this yet, where the planet has moved into a new phase, where human influence on the biosphere, through the way we live, consume, travel, etc., has fundamentally changed the conditions we have to live with. And we can see that in extreme weather, and we can see that, or at least I think we can see that. Some people might not agree, but we can see that the planet has changed, and is changing, and is continuing to change. They're sort of trailblazing on that. The GRP is much more of the farmhand of that. We're implementing. We're working with, you could sort of define it as 3 separate things. We're a knowledge broker. So during the 2.5 years, we've funded 22 projects in our focus areas. And we're learning from that as much as we can. We run challenge funds, so we can scale and identify new ways of doing things, new technology, and so on. And we can also bring that up to the third arm of what we do, which is policy work, to lift those learnings on a policy level. And because of the platform we have with the Stockholm Resilience Center and the donors that we have, which will soon be joined by a few others, we hope that we can have that influence. Are we doing a good job? No. There's plenty of work to be done. We need to be much more disruptive. If we continue doing what we've done in the past, it's not going to change. We need to be more disruptive. What is resilience? Does anyone want to venture into what resilience is? Yeah, I'm not challenging you because I'm struggling with the term myself, but on a high level, we think of it as the ability to live with change, which sort of covers everything, right? But then you break it down, and you have to sort of adapt it to the situation you're in. There are some learnings, and I'll get back to that. Our lens for what is good and what is bad development has changed. It started off long ago, and we did relief aid, and then we did political agendas, and then we did other things, and then we moved into budget support, and then we changed from budget support. And then we started more on private sector development, and then we had a backlash on that. So where we are now is a much more evolved and sophisticated way of doing development. Budgets have really gone up. We can see that various donors are really competing for giving the most and having the biggest impact. And with that comes controls and slow processes. I mean, as a former CEDA employee, I know all about those processes. They're frustrating, but they're needed also to make sure that we do good development. But how do we change that? How do we make it deeper? How do we put the hooks in the system deeper so that we can really have that change? Without going too much into detail on how you should work with resilience, because if you look at the agenda, we're going to learn a lot today. We have 7 principles that we try to stick to. It's important to be diverse in your approach. You can't do just one thing and build a school and expect that everything changes. You need to have a holistic approach. You need to connect, connectivity. No one can do everything, but together we can do a lot more. You need efficient feedback loops. If something goes wrong, or even worse, if you're doing harm, which is not uncommon, you need to know that, and you need to have mechanisms in place to stop that. You need complex adaptive thinking. That means that you need to consider what I just said, and then you need to be quick in doing it as well. You need to learn from mistakes. When Garrett first approached me about this, I interpreted the question, could you come and talk about failures? And I said, absolutely, because I've failed a lot. And hopefully I'm wiser from it. But we need to put that into our system to learn and accept failure. In my 7 years at CEDA, I never read a report from a project or a program that we funded that stated clearly we failed. Never. But I can tell you that many of them did fail. It rather said, well, because of this sort of circumstance that was beyond our control, we didn't fulfill all our our targets. Or the targets were set wrong, as in the learnings can be on so many different levels. We need participation. You need the stakeholders in there. And I know there's been this, yeah, you should immerse yourself into the situation, you should have local ownership and stuff like that. What does that really mean? Well, you need the many stakeholders, and you need to know what the real problem is. From a business perspective, you need to know your customer. You need to know what the real needs are, and what the real needs are perceived to be by the local community. And if you don't do that, you might end up in the wrong place. Now, based on that, you also need a polycentric governance. So you need all of these guys to be part of shaping this. Now, that is complex. It's much easier to just decide in Stockholm at headquarters, we're going to do this, and then we're going to follow up on it, because I know how to report on that in my system. But that doesn't work. You need to have that really wide participation. So coming back to resilience and the need for it, we can see that extreme weather patterns are emerging. Irma is followed by Maria. I had some meetings yesterday canceled because of the storm. People couldn't actually move. It's happening at a more massive scale than before. Now, if that happens to Florida, it is really sad. But if it happens to a country where you are already at breaking point, and where a large portion of the population really has no margin, they're one bad decision, or one semi-bad decision, or one extreme event away from total disaster, then it's all the more devastating. Things are changing, and it's not only the environment, but it's how we live. It's pollution. The economy is growing. We're always seeking to grow in new directions. It's happening at faster and faster pace. It's hard to keep track. It's hard to have a map of what is really going on. And you all know this. It's nothing new that I'm saying, but it's a real concern for what we see here. Now, the new era that I mentioned, the Anthropocene, coming from human root. We can see that the human influences on the planet has big impacts on, say, my home country, Sweden. I can already now see I have a small cottage. It's really tiny, but it's on an island. Now, that's bad news. I'm 7 meters above sea level. I have to take an insurance to sort of compensate for any potential rise in sea level. Now, if it happens in Sweden, and if it happens to me, I'll be covered by insurance. There is some sort of a structure to take care of me. I might lose my house, but I'll live. If you are in a place, and I don't want to single out any country, but if you are in a country where the economy is a little bit fragile, where the political system is a little bit like shaky, where the institutions are in place, and where legalities and insurance and stuff like that is beyond the reach of the normal household, because it's too expensive, the service doesn't exist, financial inclusion is not really on the agenda yet, you rely on maybe one cash crop, then you're stuffed when these things happen. We can see that in Kenya, the maize shortage, which is partly political, I would guess, and partly drought related. And when drought happens once, it's more likely to happen again, which makes it more likely to happen again, and so on. So it's a vicious circle that we need to break. Good things have happened in the past, and this is an example. I'll loop back to resilience on this. We speak sometimes of the Green Revolution. In the 60s and 70s, we started producing lots more food in parts of the world, and hunger and famine sort of really reduced. Now, there were effects of that. There were long-term environmental effects of it, and you also had, because of the system we're in, food prices started becoming more volatile and beyond the reach of the poor. So you're sort of back to square one. Really good that it happened, but did it happen in the right way? Was the feedback loop quick enough? Was there enough participation among the stakeholders? Or were everyone pushed by this extreme urgency of the famine? So I don't have the answer to this. It's really, really messed up, but we need to think about it, and we need to work on it. Another example is fishing. So fishing has become more industrialized. Now we know the consequences of it, but initially it was just a very good source of protein and jobs and so on, and it had good impact. What we see now is that you have monocultures of species dominating parts of the sea. You have the cod that has disappeared from the parts of the Atlantic, You have the main lobster that is dominating the eastern seaboard, parts of North America, at the cost of other species. You have the tuna industry outside of East Africa. So they're all very good examples of what can be done and, you know, short-term good impacts. But it's also a set of good examples for how the Anthropocene came in, because these were man-made things, right? So we need to be careful. Now, the positive note, okay? What we need is a new way to think about things. We need to see humans as a potentially positive force on Earth. So when we design ways to solve the carbon challenge, to enhance biodiversity, to clean up pollution and the really negative impacts that have on both poor and median income households, and when we try to lift a disturbingly big part of the human population out of poverty so that they are not drowning, but they have an ability to actually build their own lives. When we do that, we need to take all of that into consideration. And I believe we can. That is what gets me up in the morning. I have 2 daughters, and if I don't try to do anything about this, and I leave a planet much worse off than what I inherited, I've totally failed. And I need to accept the failure so far so that we can learn from it and work together and be optimistic and positive about what we can do. So I'm not sure how positive that came out, but it was meant to be very positive. I think the potential in human inventiveness and in our ability to hustle behind the common cause is really there, and we can do it. We're one. On that note, I'd like to start the panel session. I'm looking for instructions now from my bosses here. So Garrett is thumbs up, good. If I could ask the panelists to come up and take a seat, please. As they do that, a little bit of process.